And what is the moment we're in now? Are we, in your judgment, in a moment in which the world order is going to change?
Yes, we're changing the world order.
Ray Dalio has a much-needed warning for all of us. And when we combine his insights with some fairly recent actions by the Federal Reserve, it's becoming clear that we're heading into uncharted waters economically. The entire monetary system is in play financially and globally, and these changes could be more profound than anything seen in decades. The Fed stunned markets by cutting interest rates by 50 basis points, the first cut since March 2020. Not many had bet on that kind of cut, and indeed, only 40% of market participants had expected the Fed to cut rates now. In fact, it is also the most surprising Fed decision since 2009, and for the first time since 2005, a Fed member dissented. These moves of the Federal Reserve did not go unnoticed around the world, and the S&P 500 reached new all-time highs, surging 20% year-to-date. But then we stand at the question as to why the Fed made such a dramatic move. And does this signal the arrival of a recession? While markets have remained stable for the most part, volatility is definitely present. Many believe we're seeing a similar setup to 2008. One thing is for sure, this will shake a lot of people out. We might see a massive market melt-up, with investors rushing in, only to get caught off guard by an eventual meltdown. This leads us to the crux of the matter, the Great Reset. We are entering what some call the Great Rate Reset. Following the Federal Reserve's recent rate cut, this shift will ripple through financial markets across all sectors. The next few steps will be critical to investors, to prepare and execute, but ultimately, that is how winners are separated from losers. As history teaches us, when the economic system is in free fall, it is the worst, as it has always been, for the poor. It all repeats itself, the pattern replaying that occurred in 2008, where bailouts ensure the additional strength of the well-off while debauching many others altogether. And this is not just me saying it. We're going to be showing you what Ray Dalio has said about the whole situation.
Those who feel disenfranchised want people who are going to fight for them. They don't want compromisers. They don't want them to be in the middle, because middle means that they're not fighting for them. They want them to have guts.
Who is Ray Dalio, you ask? Well, he's a global macro investor with over 50 years of experience. Started Bridgewater Associates from his two-bedroom apartment in New York City. Over the next 47 years, he turned it into the largest hedge fund in the world and one of the most influential private companies in the US. Dalio's groundbreaking investment strategies, such as risk parity, alpha overlay, and the all-weather approach, revolutionized how global institutions think about investing. All these contributions led to his having won many Lifetime Achievement Awards, and he has also been a source of sought-after macroeconomic advice for policies around the world. Because of his powerful influence on global policies, Time magazine declared him one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Currently, Ray is still very much involved at Bridgewater as an investor, mentor, and board member. And if that were not enough, he has several best-selling books to his name. Principles, Life and Work, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, and Principles for Navigating Big Debt Crises. Now we've reached the end of an era for interest rates. Global market yields are now above neutral levels, and investors will need to rely more on core fixed income to reach their financial goals. While some expect modest U.S. growth slowdowns next year, growth will likely remain positive, though uncertain. We're in the midst of what many are calling a big reset. But what exactly does that mean? The term refers to the recovery phase that follows a long period of negative or stagnant price performance across various asset classes. Citibank even released a report explaining why investors shouldn't miss this critical moment. Historically, investing during crises, when the market hits rock bottom, was the go-to strategy. However, this time around, the reset is occurring without the traditional signs of a recession.
You have always been interested in investing, but then in 1971, you were a clerk at the exchange. Nixon goes on TV on Sunday. Tell us what happened then and what you learned.
Okay, well, I'm clerking on the floor of the exchange, 1971. President Nixon announces to the world that the United States is defaulting on its obligation to take that paper that they have, which was like checks in a checkbook, and give them the gold.
Close the gold window.
Close the gold window. So he defaulted on the obligation to pay the money because the gold was running down. They didn't have enough, and it was like a bank run. So I walk onto the exchange floor expecting...
You went early because you thought...
Yeah. I expect that there's going to be a chaos and things would be bad. And the stock market went up the most in decades. And I didn't understand it. And that's because that was the first time a devaluation happened. I never went through one of those. And I studied history, and I found the exact same thing happened on March 5th, 1933, except it was with Roosevelt and a radio rather than a TV.
All asset classes, including cryptocurrencies, are currently positioned to yield strong returns. As interest rates are being adjusted, investors are urged to reset their expectations and take advantage of this unique moment. But the big question remains, are you prepared? This isn't just a small opportunity. We're witnessing a major financial shift that extends across equities, fixed income, and alternative investments. Following the dismal performances of 2022, markets are healing and set to recover. Despite some thinking a recession is still looming, Citibank and other institutions suggest that missing out on this moment could be a costly mistake for investors. Yet uncertainty lingers. Dalio emphasizes that 2025 will bring more serious challenges. Although some reports project modest growth, others, including JP Morgan, indicate that a more severe slowdown is on the horizon, starting as early as 2024. Dalio himself has repeatedly mentioned that 2025 may be the year when things really take a turn for the worse.
So you studied 10 empires, 4 in particular relevance to us: the Dutch, the British, the US, and China. And you have come to the conclusion that there are these empires are great powers, go through cycles, and as you say, even though times and circumstances have changed, the cycles don't. And be prepared, even though it has not happened in your lifetime, big disruptive things can happen.
Well, I think it's not adequate to just assume that because it happened in the past that it's going to happen, or the cycles. What the cycles do is they shine light on the cause-effect relationship. So let's take a basic dynamic. If you have a financial crisis, and we can get into what causes it, at the same time as you have large wealth gaps and therefore big disagreements.
For investors, the timing is crucial. Some might be waiting for a dip, thinking they can buy lower, but this thinking could backfire. A market melt-up, where investors buy during an upswing, expecting even higher returns, could be followed by an abrupt recession and a subsequent market crash. That crash, Dalio suggests, will signify the full reset of global markets. Beyond financial markets, Dalio points to a much broader shift. We're entering a new world order driven by technological advancements like blockchain, AI, and tokenization. But he warns against being distracted by trends like Bitcoin and Ethereum, advising people to focus on the larger changes in the global financial system. Dalio's insights don't stop at economics. He also explores how the world is on the brink of significant conflicts. His analysis suggests that 2025-2026 is a critical period, one where both civil and international wars could become a reality. He warns that without understanding the larger cycles of history, people may be caught off guard by these events.
You are likely to have populism. And if you have those two things coming together, it's an explosive combination. It was said in the earlier session, for example, capitalism. What about capitalism? It's becoming unpopular. Now imagine a bad situation with capitalism, and that's played out through history for good reasons. If you combine that with the external conflict, the war, the external war. When I say war, it is a reality that there are measures of health in an economy's rising and declining. And so when you have that geopolitical conflict and you put that on top, you have a dangerous set of circumstances.
The highest risk point for what many are calling the Great Reset aligns with the years 2025 to 2026. This timeline corresponds with a critical shift in global markets and political landscapes, particularly as we enter a period just after the U.S. presidential elections. It is in this process that we will see vast changes, not only at the pinnacle and in leadership, but more extensive changes in the economic world order. In this regard, signals from the elites, including institutions like the Bank for International Settlements, the World Economic Forum, and the IMF, have been felt for some years now. Ray Dalio described that since 1945, the United States defined the global order, emerging from World War II, unmatched with military, economic, and monetary might. The U.S. accounted for half of the world's GDP and had 80% of the world's gold at the time. This made the U.S. dollar the world's reserve currency and paved the road for its decades-long dominance.
In 1945, we started the New World Order. What I mean is, throughout history, there's a fight for control because there's no world court that you go to and plead your case. And so there's a fight for power. So there's a war, and then the winners come out of that war, and the winners set the rules. And so 1945, the United States had 80% of the world's money. Gold was money at the time. It had half the world's GDP. It had a monopoly on military power. So the U.S. set the world order. That's why the United Nations is in New York. Washington, D.C. has the IMF and the World Bank.
But times are changing. There are three major shifts happening right now. Shifts that we haven't seen in our lifetime. First, the massive levels of debt and money creation are affecting the value of money globally. Central banks are facing tough choices. Do they pay back debt with hard money, risking debt crises, or do they print more, devaluing currencies and fueling inflation? In nearly all cases, they print money, leading to inflation, and that's exactly where we find ourselves today. The second shift involves a deep internal conflict within countries, particularly when there's a wide gap between wealth and values. This leads to populism, both on the left and the right. People feeling disenfranchised no longer want compromise. They want strong leaders who will fight for their interests. Positions harden and compromise becomes impossible. This hardening could bring us to a point where future elections, possibly as soon as 2024, may see neither side willing to accept defeat. It's already visible, a growing distrust in institutions, including the Supreme Court, and a society increasingly polarized along political lines. This leads to the question, could we be on the brink of a civil war-like event? As unthinkable as it may seem, Ray Dalio and others suggest that the conditions are there. We are at a critical juncture where global political and economic forces are shifting rapidly, and we need to prepare. The next few years, especially from 2025 to 2026, may define the future of not only the U.S., but the entire world order. If you examine the patterns unfolding globally, you'll notice a troubling trend. Gaps between nations and their people are widening, and positions are hardening. As Ray Dalio outlines, there are three major forces at play that are reshaping the world order. The third force is the rise of a great power, challenging the dominance of the United States. After 1945, the U.S. emerged as the dominant global power, but now, with China and other countries rising, that dominance is no longer guaranteed. We're witnessing the progression of various conflicts that follow a familiar historical template. First comes a trade war, then a technology war, geopolitical influence wars, and eventually capital and economic warfare. These steps are playing out right now, particularly with the use of sanctions. History tells us that military conflict could be the next step.
1945, we began a new world order. Or in some countries, they changed their domestic order. They have a revolution. But there's always a war at the beginning, some kind of conflict at the beginning, and the system changes. Okay, 1945, we have a war. There are new winners of the war. Whether that's domestic or internally, there's a war, and now the new folks are in charge. And they then determine what's going to happen. They set the rules. The United States, since 45, we've been the American world order. The reason the United Nations, IMF, World Bank are in the United States is because of
system.
that. The reason the current dollar is the world's reserve currency is because of that. They set the rules. Over that period of time, then you don't go into a war. You have a period of rebuilding and then usually a period of prosperity because nobody wants to go into war again. and then so you begin this cycle.
Ray Dalio has mapped out these stages, providing a clear outline for the changing world order. It's crucial to understand this template and how recent events tie directly into it. But there's an element that Dalio might be underestimating: the impact of digital currencies and emerging technologies. Consider how the BRICS nations are already pushing for a digital currency, aiming to challenge the US dollar and break away from systems like SWIFT. In March 2022, following sanctions on Russia, the US issued Executive Order 15067, which outlined plans for a digital dollar. It's all connected to a broader agenda, the Great Reset, promoted by the World Economic Forum back in June 2020. Key technologies like blockchain, digital identity, and internet governance are integral to this reset. What's more concerning is that we're entering what could be stage 6 in Dalio's framework: civil or international war. With the US so polarized, especially around elections, we're on the brink of a potential civil conflict. The last election saw record voter turnout, and this time, even more people are expected to vote. The divide is growing deeper, and it's hard to predict how this will unfold, but it's clear that serious unrest is possible.
Different types of war. Economic war, certainly a chips war and economic war is a very big risk. And that is happening at a time of that probably conditions might get more contentious because of the political season we're in. So in other words, between now and 2 years from now, when the new administration comes in, you're going to have, there are a lot of hawks that want to push those lines too. And so there's that edge.
The best way to prepare? Consider physical assets like gold and silver. Investing in the very technologies the elites are using could also be a strategy, not just to protect yourself, but to thrive financially through the chaos. The pandemic has accelerated these changes, propelling us closer to this new world order. And while most of the world remains unaware, those who are informed can take steps to be ready. That'll do it for this video, folks. Thanks for watching until the end, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of the same.